India's United Payments Interface or the UPI clocked 6.78 billion transactions in September 2022. People transacted 11.16 trillion rupees during the same period using UPI. In 2021, transactions worth 31% of India's GDP was done through UPI. It has gone international with 7 countries already accepting payments using UPI and more to join soon, given its growing popularity. So much so that Google recommended UPI to the US Federal Reserve for digital transactions. But how come an entity that didn't exist before 2016 has become the market leader in digital transactions in 2022? How does it actually work in the real time, and what's the story behind its tremendous success? Also, how is it going to challenge the established global players like VISA and MasterCards in the coming years? Let's discuss all this in detail. Hello guys, I am Saurav and welcome to The Arc. In December 2008, the National Payments Corporation of India or the NPCI was incorporated for operating retail payments and settlement systems in India. NPCI is a not-for-profit institution owned by a consortium of major banks and promoted by the Reserve Bank of India. It's an architecture framework with a set of standard API specifications to facilitate fast and secure online payments. Before UPI, there were RTGS, NEFT, IMPS payment systems for online payments. But there were certain drawbacks with all these methods. And the most basic issue was, for any digital transaction to take place, the payer has to enter the bank account number and IFSC code of the payee, which is cumbersome. This complexity was completely eliminated with introduction of VPA or the virtual payment address in UPI, which we'll discuss later. UPI, however, is not the only product NPCI came up with. There is a whole range of financial utility products NPCI developed over the years that created an ecosystem of financial products. IMPS, RuPay, UPI, Bheem, Bharat Bill Pay being the notable ones. UPI has been tremendously successful. How successful? Let's find out in numbers. From a meager 38 lakhs worth of transactions in July 2016, UPI transactions soared to over 10 lakh crores in July 2022. In 6 years, UPI transaction numbers grew from 0 to 6.28 billion and 10.62 trillion rupees in value. In year 2021, UPI clocked a volume of $940 billion worth of transactions, which is equivalent to 31% of India's GDP. Dilip Asbe, the MD and CEO of NPCI, recently said in an interview that they are targeting 1 billion transactions per day in the next 5 years. In terms of percentage of total transactions, UPI's share stood at 6% in 2016, whereas debit and credit card transactions had 36% share. In 2021, UPI jumped to 63% and card transactions shrunk to only 9%. Last year, FinShots published this graphic comparing real-time payment transactions around the world in 2020. The graphic clearly shows India had more number of real-time transactions than that of China, US and UK combined, thanks to UPI. But what's the reason behind this popularity? There are 4 main factors that worked in favor of UPI. That is, PM Jan Dhan Yojana, demonetization, cheap internet revolution, and COVID-19 pandemic. PM Modi launched Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana in August 2014. The scheme aimed at financial inclusion to ensure access to financial services like basic savings and deposit accounts, especially for those who were left untouched over all these years. Zero balance bank accounts were created and debit cards were issued. The bank accounts were also used by the government for direct benefit transfer. Number of PM Jan Dhan Yojana accounts grew spectacularly from 14.72 crore in March 2015 to 46.25 crore in August 2022. 35% of Indian adults had a bank account in 2011, which soared to 80% in 2017. It was a giant leap. But in November 2016, demonetization was announced and 501,000 rupees notes suddenly went out of circulation. At that point, 86.4% of the total currency went out of circulation overnight, which means less cash in hand, hence the need for more digital transactions. For digital transactions, the most basic requirement was internet. And internet was not cheap back then, but then started the era of cheap internet revolution driven by Jio. So a large number of people with bank accounts and mobile phones with cheap internet, compounded with less cash in hand, started to turn towards digital transactions. Then in 2020, COVID-19 pandemic happened. It got difficult to go out and make physical transactions, hence more digital transactions. But apart from external factors, UPI has its own USPs. That is, as a system, it's extremely user-friendly, fast and reliable, which made it so popular. And the most important feature is zero MDR. That is, the payer or the payee both don't have to pay any transaction charges for using UPI's platform. We'll discuss the economics and politics of MDR later. But let's first understand how UPI actually works. To understand the system better, let's do a live demo. This is the QR code of say the grocery store owner near my house. And I have to pay 100 rupees for my purchases. I scan this QR code with my UPI app, which is PhonePe in this case. Now I have to enter the amount I have to pay. Next, I am prompted to enter my UPI PIN. After entering the PIN, payment is processed. 100 rupees has been debited from my bank account and credited to the shop owner's account. But how does everything work in the backend? Let's find out. But before getting into the details, we need to first understand a few keywords. VPA or Virtual Payment Address is a unique UPI ID that one needs to create with bank account and mobile number to use the UPI services. PSP or Payment Service Provider is a banking company that connects to the UPI platform for providing UPI payment services to the PSP and TPAP, which in turn enable users and merchants to use the UPI payment facility. TPAP or Third Party Application Provider is a service provided to the PSP and participates in the UPI through the PSP. Issuer PSP is the bank or PSP that creates the VPA. Acquirer PSP is the bank or PSP that processes the BPA transactions. Issuer and acquirer talk to each other via a switch, which in this case is the UPI switch managed by NPCI. Payee is the person or entity who is receiving the money in beneficiary bank. Payer is the person or entity who is paying the money from remitter bank. So it starts with onboarding. Someone willing to use the UPI services first needs to create a UPI ID in the app registered with NPCI. It can be a bank's app or a TPAP like Google Pay or PhonePe. After verification, BPA is generated and the bank account details are linked to it. A BPA may look something like this, where the first part is a name or phone number and the second part is the issuer bank's ID, depending on the app one is using. The UPI ID is then secured with two-factor authentication with biometric and or PIN. So a customer can transact through his bank's app or any third-party app registered with NPCI. But it's important to remember that only a bank is authorized to create VPA or communicate with the NPCI switch. Hence, TPAPs like Google Pay or PhonePe tie up with banks to facilitate UPI transactions. For example, Google Pay has partnered with 4 major banks, that is HDFC, Axis, ICICI and the State Bank of India, and its VPA may look something like this. So someone having an account with HDFC Bank can have a VPA with ICICI or Axis Bank. Payment flow varies with the number of entities involved, that is payer PSP, remitter bank, payee PSP and beneficiary bank. In some cases, they can be the same, that is payer PSP and remitter bank are HDFC Bank and payee PSP and beneficiary bank are ICICI Bank. But for the sake of maximum complexity, let's take the 4-party model, where all 4 entities are distinct. So a customer who has their account in Axis Bank wants to pay using Google Pay to the merchant, whose account is in SBI but is using PhonePe. Once the customer initiates the transaction, scanning the QR code that has the merchant's VPA embedded, the payer PSP, that is Google Pay, using HDFC Bank, here forwards the request to NPCI. NPCI then forwards the request to the payee PSP, that is PhonePe, using ICICI Bank, to extract the payee's account details from the VPA. The payee PSP then provides the information back to NPCI. NPCI now checks with the remitter bank, that is Axis Bank, to debit the amount requested from the payer's account. Upon receiving the debit response, NPCI sends a credit request to the beneficiary bank, that is SBI. After receiving the credit response, NPCI sends the payment status response to the payer and payee PSP. And the speaker on the merchant shop starts playing the transaction completion message. And done. That is how a simple UPI QR code scanned payment works. You know what makes this entire UPI payment system fantastic? Its core of the system, that is NPCI. It's completely developed in-house. And you put a cover on it and the system is yours. The technological barrier is gone because the most critical part of the system is managed by NPCI. Any authorized PSP can make the system its own. And that's how UPI has democratized the digital payment system, breaking the monopoly of global players. However, RBI recently raised concerns over UPI usage getting concentrated with two big players, that is Google Pay and PhonePe. Here is a chart of users in India using UPI on different platforms for the month of August 2022. From this graphic, it can clearly be seen PhonePe and Google Pay together command more than 80% of UPI transactions volume. RBI recently in a press statement said that it's considering to impose a cap of 30% market share on platforms to address the monopolies of big players. Now speaking of big players and monopolies, globally there essentially are two big players, VISA and MasterCard, that have ruled the digital card transaction space, with China's UnionPay making inroads recently. According to estimates, in the year 2019, $6.7 trillion worth of transaction was done using debit and credit cards in the US, and more than 60% of that was done using Visa cards alone. In 2021, Visa reported a net revenue of $24.1 billion and was valued at $337 billion. So what does Visa do? Visa does not issue cards, rather provides banks and financial institutions with Visa branded payment products that can be used for transactions. Then how does Visa make so much money? The answer is MDR. MDR stands for Merchant Discount Rate. It is the rate or amount that the lending bank and Visa charge for using their services to process this digital payment. But who pays that? As the name suggests, the merchant. MDR varies from 0 to 3%, and these charges are so high that according to estimates, Visa operates on 30 to 40% margins. With its wide network all over the world, Visa has become a monopoly, causing resentment among the merchants, and have also caused a lot of litigations against Visa in the US. Now coming back to UPI. I mentioned zero MDR earlier. So for using UPI services, neither the payee nor the payer has to pay any transaction charges. But then don't the banks lose money? Yes, they do. And for that, the government compensates them with subsidies. Government allocated 1500 crore rupees for the promotion of digital payments in the budget for financial year 2022. Subsequently, in December 2021, the Union Cabinet approved 1300 crore rupees to incentivize low-value transactions through RuPay debit card and Bhim UPI. But is it enough? Industry sources suggest it's not. The payment system operators have invested significant amounts to create infrastructure and to encourage people to move from cash to digital payments. And there has to be returns on their investments for the business to survive. Which is why RBI released a discussion paper on charges in payment systems in August this year, seeking public opinion on the matter. But there was a huge public outcry, which forced the government to issue a clarification that as UPI is a digital public good, it is for the time being will remain free to use. But the cost recovery has to be done using other means. What other means, we'll have to wait and see. In April 2020, NPCI incorporated a whole new subsidiary called the NPCI International Payments Limited, with an aim to provide easy, cost-effective and secure payment services to the world. UPI along with RuPay debit and credit cards are world-class products developed by the NPCI. It's easy and secure to use, free for the time being, and has great adaptability and interoperability, which is making it so popular in other countries. Singapore, UAE, Nepal, Bhutan, France, UK have already started accepting UPI payments, and Oman is the latest to join. NPCI is in talks with more than 30 countries for adoption of UPI and RuPay cards. Very soon, Indians traveling abroad to anywhere in the world will be able to seamlessly transact using their UPI apps. UPI has tremendous potential, but can it replace giants like Visa? Considering its increasing acceptability all across the world, why not? It's a fintech revolution in India, and the world is going to experience it soon. Thanks for watching. I hope to see you soon with a new video. Thank you.